I'd like to thank you for attending, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm very pleased and honored. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm most pleased to be here, and I'm most pleased to be able to speak to you about a few things that hopefully you'll find interesting and enjoyable, and you'll also learn something from. As you can see, the theme of this is the music industry is not dying. And you hear everywhere on the news these days that, in fact, the music business is in trouble. And maybe it is, a certain portion of it, but not all of it. And that's what we want to talk about today. So there was a time when there was new technology. Piracy was everywhere. There was a recession going on. And sales were down, worse than ever. Can anybody tell me what year this is? This was?
2005. Now still here?
1980. In 1980, everyone thought the music business was dead. And that's because it was at its lowest point. Little did anybody know that within a year, the music business would actually begin to ascend to heights that it never even thought it would ever attain. So the two things I want to talk about today is the state of the music business and also your place in the music business. So let me give you some figures first of all. The global recorded music sales last year, 16.6 billion. Physical sales, 10 billion. Now physical sales means CDs. Everybody says the CD is dead, and maybe it will be pretty soon, but it's not today. Many people still buy CDs. Digital, lots of people download, and they pay for it. And that's up, and it's still going up. And digital is now a third of the market, about. And this is globally we're talking about. This year, though, digital albums are up by 15%. Now, last year, they were up by 1%, and everybody thought that albums were dead. Albums are not dead. In last year, we can track this a little better than most other countries. There were 240 million CDs sold last year. Now, that's a lot of CDs when you think about it. And people actually wanted to buy. They went out and they bought. And in fact, you'll find that people will buy more CDs if they're given the chance. Now, I'm not saying this is going to continue, but in fact, people still buy music. They still buy a lot of it. Publishing, worldwide publishing, is still huge. It's still 9.4 billion. Worldwide concert revenue, 23.5 billion. So all this means that last year there was $67.6 billion in the music industry. It's the highest it has ever been. So when people tell you that the music industry is dying, they're looking at a small portion of it. They're looking at recorded music. But the music industry as a whole, in fact, is very, very healthy, which is good for those of you who want to be part of it. Now, this is Adele. Anybody buy any of her CDs? Yeah, a few. Well, you and 25 million other people bought her CDs. What's important about this is people said there would never be another seller like her. There would never be someone that would sell 10 million ever again. And yet she turned around and sold 25 million worldwide. It's still possible to sell millions. Michael Jackson sold 39 million units last year worldwide. Not one do you ever see on the chart. None of this ever charted because they're what's known as catalog sales, and catalog sales don't ever hit the charts. they're not usually ever counted in any numbers. So when people say that the music business is having trouble selling, there's Michael Jackson last year. So, who's making all this money? Let me give you a little history lesson. Now, a lot of this relates mostly to the United States, but the United States is in fact a window into the rest of the world and how it all works. Again, we can track it a little bit easier than you can in other countries, but just let me give you a little bit of a history of how the music business has worked. This is what I call the 5 different eras of the music business. But before we hit the mature music business, we go to Music 0.05. And this was way back in the 1880s, turn of the century, 1900. And mostly what we were selling then was sheet music. That was the commodity. Then it went to piano rolls. People were actually buying piano rolls for their player piano. And all this was done out of one place in New York, and it was called Tin Pan Alley. Music business eventually changed. It eventually went to vinyl records. And this is the Music 1.0, first generation of the music business. This is when we had music entrepreneurs. We had Berry Gordy from Motown. We had Ahmet Ertegun from Atlantic Records. We had Jack Holtzman at Elektra. We had Mo Austin at Warner Brothers. These were all entrepreneurs that loved music. They loved their artists. They were their audience. They were in the music business because they loved it. The way it worked is this. There was a vinyl record. The vinyl record was sold to a record store. It was heard on the radio. People went out and bought it. Looks like this. You had the artist. The artist was signed to the record label. They made the record and sold it to the record store. Then they got the radio to play it. Their promotion department got the radio to play it. The fan heard it, went to the record store and bought it. But everything revolved around the record label. The record label was in the middle, and if you weren't part of the record label, nothing happened. Keep this in mind because that's what's changed between then and now. When we get to Music 1.5, which is the second generation of the music business, this is when the music business changes completely. Everything changes. The reason why, CDs come out. Now they're still sold in record stores, but the big difference is it becomes what they call a cash cow. Because suddenly the record labels don't have to produce the music, they don't have to pay for production, they don't have to pay for promotion. They don't have to pay anything other than the pressing of the CD and get it in the stores. So everybody wanted to replace their vinyl record with the new version, with the CD. So what they did is they went out and they bought it a second time. What that meant was there was a lot of money in the music business all of a sudden, and whenever there's a lot of money in the business, this is what happens. Wall Street. Wall Street takes notice whenever there's a lot of money. Before you know it, the big 5 record labels were bought. EMI was bought by Thorn Industries, which was an electronic manufacturer. Universal is bought by Vivendi. Vivendi makes water. They're a French water company. Why would they be in the music business? I don't know. Columbia was bought by Sony Music. And that was what really rocked the music industry. When Columbia, which was the biggest record label, when that was bought, everybody thought, wow, the business is changing. Warner Brothers was bought by Time. And the only one that wasn't purchased was BMG, which was a German holding company. And they remained, and they still remain, independent to this day. Here's the next big thing that changed the music business, MTV. Because all of a sudden you went from this, you went from an artist was more important, their music was important, to this. The image was now more important than the art. We're still suffering from that today. Now we go to the third generation of the music business. This was 1997 or so, and this was the rise of the MP3. When the MP3 happened, suddenly you got peer-to-peer networks and music piracy. But the record labels really didn't care because they were making more money than ever. CD sales were stronger than ever, and they really overlooked the whole MP3. Not they overlooked it, they didn't care because they weren't making any money out of it. That's when we come to Music 2.5, the fourth generation of the music business. And what makes this different is it's the first time when digital music is monetized, when someone makes music. And it's from iTunes, who still has the majority of the market, to Rhapsody, to Amazon MP3. But here's what really happened at that point. CD sales took a nosedive. That's when you began to hear the music business is dead. But it was dead. It wasn't dead, but it was not as healthy as it was in this one sector, recorded music only. The rest of the music business was just fine. Now we come to Music 3.0. And it's a completely new set of rules and a new way of doing business, because it's the first time that an artist, a producer, a publisher, an engineer can reach out to his fan, to his client, and talk to him, promote to him, and they can talk back. It's the first time. Up until this point, you had to have a fan club, a record label. There was a middleman always. Now you don't need a middleman. You can do it yourself. So here's a figure I want you to get this in your head because it's very important. 96%. Everybody thinks that a major artist, a superstar, makes most of their money from recorded music. It's not true. 96% of the income from a major artist comes from everything but recorded music. And this is the way it breaks down. Touring gets the majority of money. There's licensing, there's merchandise, there's publishing. And you can see the smallest piece is from recorded music. Musicians, recording artists make most of their money from everything but recorded music. And the reason why is this. Your music is your marketing. The way that you get fans is for people to hear your music. If they don't hear it, they can't become your fans. It used to be you'd hear it on the radio, and you'd hear it for free. You wouldn't pay for it. You still hear it on the radio, but you hear it on the internet. If someone steals your music, that's okay. They're hearing it. Your music is your marketing. So, what's the future of the music business? Well, first thing is subscription is the new download. How many of you are Spotify subscribers? Any of you do Spotify? Okay, there's 1, 2.
Is it available in Turkey?
I'm sorry?
Is it available in Turkey?
I don't know. Is it a Spotify?
It's not. iTunes is not.
iTunes is not in Turkey either.
You cannot purchase from iTunes in Turkey.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Well, you will at some point in time, you can bet. Subscription music is the new thing in most of the rest of the world. Subscription means that instead of downloading, instead of paying to download it, that what you're doing is you're renting the music. You're basically saying for $10 a month, I can listen to any song I want anywhere I go, that I have an internet connection. That's the new thing. That's what's happening. And pretty soon we will not be downloading. We will not be buying songs on the internet. Pretty soon you're going to be paying for this through your phone, through your ISP. So in other words, you'll be paying an extra $10 on your internet connection for your music. Modern record labels are changing. They're changing back to the first model. And remember that when I began, I told you about the Music 1.0 entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs that loved the music, that they were part of the audience. They loved their artists. That's coming back around again. Where before you had, during Music 1.5, you had attorneys and accountants that were running music businesses, that were running record labels. No more. This is turning back around. A new recommendation engine. Now what that means is, in the United States, the way it worked for a long time was you'd listen to the radio for the DJ. The DJ was important because you knew if whatever he or she played, you would like it. So you trusted their taste. Their taste was important. Then we got away from that in the United States, where we were told what to play. The DJs had a list. You can either play this, 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 or this, this, and this. But the new thing on the internet is someone that you trust that recommends new music to you. And a wild card. A wild card means something that we've never seen before. A new technology that we don't know exists yet, which will change the music business. It always does. So let's talk about your path to success in the music business. There are 3 keys. This is the first one. You need education. It's vitally important. When I first started, you could get a job in a recording studio by just showing up. And sure, you would run and you'd buy pizza for people. You would sweep floors. But if you stayed long enough, you would have a place in the business, in the studio. No more. No more. You need an education. Everything is so technical that if you don't have a proper education, you can't even get in the door. So that's number one. That has to happen. The second one is learn social media. Social media is vitally important to the music business right now. So much so, when I talk to people that are smarter than me in the music business, what they tell me is the 5th Beatle is the social media person. When a new band starts, their 5th person is the webmaster or their social media person. It's vitally important. And it's important for you to know social media because you want to take control of your career. You want to drive the bus. You want to be the person that's controlling everything. You have to know about social media. Why? Why do you need social media? Well, the best advertising is word of mouth. Social media is online word of mouth. Let me give you some figures. 96% of Generation Y is on social media. Who isn't on social media of some type here? That's what you don't do social media? None at all. No Facebook, no Twitter, none of that. Okay. You should learn.
I used to, but I gave up.
I know why. I'm going to address that pretty soon. If Facebook were a country, it'd be the 3rd biggest in the world. It's huge. It's over 1 billion people. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's big. If you have a business, you need a Facebook page. And the reason why is, if you're online with a business, you can actively sell to people. And Dell just proved this. Just through a Twitter campaign, they sold 3 million laptops. It's vitally important that you do social media. And finally, if you're a musician of any type, if you're an artist, online, the #1 place that people find new music is through YouTube. YouTube is vitally important to an artist. It doesn't mean that you have to do music videos, it just means your music has to be there. Even if all you put up is lyrics, your music has to be on YouTube. That's how most people find new music. So, let's talk a little bit about social media. One of the things that we can do with social media is we can communicate. We can communicate with our fans, our clients, and they can communicate back. And the more that happens, the more they love you. We can promote. We can grow this audience. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit about promotion, as a matter of fact, in a little bit. And we can brand ourselves. And whenever I talk about branding to an audience of musicians, their eyes begin to glaze over. Because no musician wants to hear about branding. They want to hear about art. They want to hear about more of what they do. But let me tell you a little bit about how this works for a musician, for an artist. A brand is nothing more than, it's a promise of consistency, and it's a promise of quality. And here's two good examples. McDonald's. No matter where you go in the world, a Big Mac is a Big Mac. It tastes the same. Coke. You buy a Coke anywhere in the world. It's the same. It tastes the same. These are perfect examples of brands. How does this work for a musician? Well, it's maintaining the same sound and the same image. I'll give you two good examples. The Beatles and Madonna. Now, you might say the Beatles changed with every record. And yes, their sound did, and yes, they dressed differently. But yet you instantly knew when you heard a Beatles song, you instantly knew it was them. And it's the same with Madonna. Madonna changed her image slightly, but you knew it was Madonna when you saw her, and you knew when you heard her music it was her. I'll give you two examples, and I don't know how familiar you are with these. One is Neil Young. Familiar with Neil Young? Yeah, it was Chris Cornell. Anybody familiar with Chris Cornell? Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, yes. Well, here's when branding didn't work for them. Neil Young was very successful as a roots artist. In about 1985 or 1986, he put out an electronic album called Trans. And what it was Neil Young with a synclavier, which was one of the first big electronic workstations, electronic music workstations. And his audience hated it. They hated him for it. It took him 5 years and 5 albums to get his audience back. Chris Cornell did the same thing. Chris Cornell is a member of Soundgarden and had a big, huge audience. He went out on his own and he did a record. It was sort of electronic, it was sort of hip-hop with Timbaland as the producer. His fans hated it and they hated him. And he had to go back with Soundgarden. These are examples of when branding works and when you don't follow your brand. It's very important to know what your brand is, to know what you stand for, to know what your sound is, to know what your image is as an artist. So let's look at your social strategy. Let's look at the most important things. Your website. If you're an artist, if you're in the music business, you need a website. That's #1 most important. Before social media, before anything. A newsletter, so you can be in touch with your fans, with your clients. If you're an engineer, you want people to remember who you are, you send them a newsletter. If you're a producer, you want your clients to remember you, you send them a newsletter. Does anyone tweet? Is anyone on Twitter? Yeah, a number of you. Twitter's very important these days for an artist. So people know what you're doing. Blog posts, 2 blogs, number of you. Blogs are important anymore. There's a couple of secrets to blogs. One is you have to be consistent. And the big thing is if people know that you're going to be blogging, your blog is going to appear at 9:30 on a Tuesday, you better have it happen at 9:30 on a Tuesday, or that's how you lose your viewers. Consistency is extremely important. Music releases. How often do you release new music? It used to be that an artist would sign for 2 albums a year in the 60s and the 70s. 2 albums a year. Then it got to be an album a year, then an album every 2 years, and an album every 5 years. Now it's back to as many singles as you can put out at a time. If you can put out a single this month and a single next month and a one the month after, that's perfect because it always keeps you in front of your fan's face. The strategy is completely different on how to do this. Facebook and Google Plus posts. Who's on Google Plus? Anyone? A few. Oh, a lot of you. It's more than in the States. Whenever I ask that, out of 100 people, there'll be 2. And YouTube video posts. Of course, YouTube is extremely important to an artist, to a musician, to a producer. So I talked about how important your website is. Your website has to be the center of your online universe. And when I say it has to be the center, there's a reason for that. You control your content, your image. You control the website. You don't control Facebook, for instance. If you were on Facebook and that was your main way to reach your fans, your clients, what happens if Facebook goes away tomorrow? Or in 5 years? It could happen. What happens if they change the way they do business? And they suddenly say, we don't want artists, we don't want music people anymore. There was a band in Los Angeles that had 900,000 Facebook fans. And they signed to a record label, to Universal, and the record label said, oh, just get rid of your Facebook page. We'll take care of it. Famous last words. You never trust a record label when they tell you that, by the way. So they got rid of their Facebook page, and of course Universal didn't do what they said. When the record came out, their 900,000 fans had no idea. There was no way they knew. Now, if they had, and of course they didn't sell anything, so the record label dropped them. If they had a website, they would have at least kept everybody abreast of what they were doing. Everyone would have known that they had a new record coming out. So what you try to do is you try to take all of your social media and you feed it into your website. You always want people going into your website, because that strategy keeps you in front of your fans, your clients. So let's talk a little bit about the elements of a successful website. Well, the name of the URL, we know it's really important. You have to have something that people understand. Now, for instance, mine is bobbyosinski.com. Very easy. If I couldn't get bobbyosinski.com, I don't know what I would have done. Keywords. Now, keywords are interesting because most people misinterpret what keywords are. They think music, engineer, recording, I play guitar, so I'll say guitar, Les Paul, you name 5 things, 5 keywords like that. But those keywords are too broad. What you'd want to have are keyword phrases. Instead of saying guitar, 12-string guitar is more important. Instead of saying music, Turkish rock music is a better keyword. So what we're talking about is a keyword phrase. The more words you have, the better. You're going to get fewer hits, but they're going to be better, higher quality hits. You don't want to have too many because Google actually doesn't like you. They penalize you if you go beyond 5. Copy is important, and everybody thinks that I'll just put pictures on my website. Pictures don't work for Google. Google loves copy. So the more text you have, the better. 200 to 600 words is ideal. This is for every page on your website. Photos are important, graphics are important, but so is text. Now, of course, the way I say this is Google wants to see this, and you want to be high in the Google rankings, the search rankings. And finally, sign up for a mailing list. You have to have something where people can sign up for your mailing list. Here's an example. This is Lincoln Park, and you can see sign up for their mailing list. I wouldn't put it there. I would have put it on the left myself, but at least they have it. So let's talk a little bit more about elements of a successful site. Anymore, you have to have a like button for Facebook. The reason why, the more likes you have, the better Google likes you. The higher in the search rankings you're going to be. The more often you refresh your content, the better. Now, I'm as bad as everybody else on this about refreshing your site. It's hard to refresh your website. It's hard to do it once a quarter. It's hard to do it once a year for some people. The easy way to do it is if you have a blog and you put it on the main page of the landing page of your website, that refreshes every time you have a new blog post. And Google will like you and it will go higher in the search rankings. Backlinks. Everybody know what backlinks are? Backlinks are how many sites are actually linked to yours. The more you have, the better you are in the search rankings. So the easy way to do that is you get all your friends to link to you. That's the way you start first, and then hopefully your fans will link to you. Hopefully your clients will link to you. You'll go higher in the search rankings. And lots of pages. Google really likes pages. The more pages you put, the better. So instead of having one short page, or having a really long page, for instance, you're better off with smaller, short pages. And here's an example. Some like buttons. It's important to have them. So here are things to avoid on your website. Opening animation, or what we call a splash page. That's so 2005. You know. People want to get right to what you're talking about. Flash animation. Flash is dead. Some of you didn't know yet, but Flash is dead. Flash is bad for a couple of reasons. First of all, it doesn't, if you put text in Flash, it doesn't show up to Google. Google does not understand text in Flash. You're better off to have just straight copy. Frames. If anybody's using frames, come into the 21st century, please. And page errors. Anytime you have a page error, you drop in the Google rankings. You get penalized for a page error. So make sure all of those links work. Every single one. So of course, when we talk about social now, these are the four, there are thousands of social sites, and there are 30 worldwide that have more than 1 million users per day. There's a huge number of social sites. These are the four biggest. Let me tell you a little bit about promotion on Facebook, how this works. So we're talking about it for marketing. Here's a typical Facebook post. Back in the studio today, feeling tired after a long weekend of partying, catching a cold. Is this good or bad? Yes, it's bad. It's too personal. Here's a better way to say that. In the studio today with Johnny Rocks for some high-energy rockabilly. This is better. And it's better because it tells you who you're in the studio with and what you're doing. That's better. This is the best. Back in Air Studios today with Johnny Rocks for some high-energy rockabilly. Excellent rhythm section of Jack X and Ronaldo. Pictures at, and there's the link. This is the most important, to always have a link in your Facebook posts. To tell as much as you can, as much detail as you can. Air Studios, we know the studio you're in. We know who you're going to be playing with. This is important. This is what your fans, this is what clients want to see. They don't want to know what you ate for breakfast. This is a post from a friend of mine. He owns a studio that I've done a lot of work in. It's called Sonora Sound. And I'm sure he didn't know what he was doing, but he actually did it very well. So he says, some really cool shots, mostly by Nick Amoroso. I've been loving Nick's photography. He's not only a great drummer, but he created one of my screensavers. So, and then he puts a picture there. And picture's important on Facebook. Better than a video. By the way, videos get far fewer comments and far fewer likes. Pictures get a lot more. Pictures get about 15% more just so you know. But he gave a shout out to one of his clients. He showed a picture. It's very strong. Here's another one. Good friend of mine, Ronnie Siago. He's playing with the Meters experience backstage before playing a show at Yoshi's. He has a picture that's very good. The only thing that would have been better is if he would have had a link. Where to find more pictures, where to find more information. So here are some things to remember about posting on Facebook. Photos are a lot better. The more you post with photos, the better off you are. Videos get fewer likes. I'm not saying don't post videos, just don't expect to get a lot of action from them. And the shorter the video, the better. If you post a 15-minute video, people are only going to watch the first 2 minutes probably anyway. Posts that ask a question get a lot higher action, a lot more action than posts that don't. The more you ask questions of your readers, of your viewers, the better off you are. It's the interaction that they crave. They love it. And long URLs work better. Now, for instance, this is my blog. This is my production blog. I have 2 blogs, by the way. One is a production blog and one is a Music 3.0 blog. And that's the long version of it. And here's the short version, bit.ly or ally, which basically compressed that into a small version. It turns out that on Twitter, these work really well. On Facebook, they don't. The longer one works better. People want to know where they're clicking on Facebook. So, the first key now in the music business is in education. The second key is knowing social media. Here's the third key, and might be the most important. Work with geniuses. When I first started out, I was lucky enough to work with many geniuses that many of you will know. It was Frank Zappa. Everybody familiar with Frank Zappa? I was lucky enough to work with him. And anybody that's worked with Frank has lots of stories, and I have a few that I'll relate to you. Just to tell you what it's like to work with someone like that, on that level. Frank had something that I think is really unique as a musician. He had perfect tempo. A lot of musicians have perfect pitch. He had perfect tempo. Now, Frank recorded everything he ever did. Every show he ever played, he recorded it. And he had a tape vault. This is a picture of his tape vault. It went to the ceiling. And we'd be sitting there, and Frank would go something like, go down to the vault and get tape number 3 from the Fillmore, third show at the Fillmore on December 24th, 1973. And I think the drum track will fit right here. And we look at him and we say, oh, Frank, come on. He'd be right. We bring the tape up, the drum track would be perfect. Frank was also great as a talent spotter. This is one of his compositions called The Black Page. And it's called The Black Page because there's a lot of notes on it. So Frank came one day to us and he said, I'm looking for a keyboard player, but he has to be really good. I used to teach at Berklee College of Music, and I had just got to Los Angeles a couple years prior to that, and I knew somebody from Berklee who was coming out, who was a great reader, great piano player. I said, Frank, I have just the guy for you. And he says, okay, he has to be good now. Here's a couple of pieces for him to learn. One was The Black Page. So I gave him to my friend, and I said, you have to learn this really well. And he looked, and he says, oh yeah, no problem, no problem. And he didn't take the time. So he sits down at the piano when he comes to audition, and Frank sits next to him. And he starts to play, and he's not doing very well. And Frank stops him. He says, well, okay, wait. Try playing, but don't use your thumbs. So now he's playing without his thumbs, and he's doing really badly. And Frank says, no, okay, stop. Play from the end of the page back. Now he's playing from the end of the page backwards without his thumbs, and he's really doing badly. And at the end, now the problem was the guy came in with a little bit of an attitude, and Frank hated that. So the guy's stumbling and he's doing badly, and Frank says, hey, you're pretty good, but you're not great. Don't feel bad. I know 3 drummers that can play this better than you can. That was the end of the audition. On the other hand, this is Ike Willis. Ike Willis was a janitor at Cobo Arena in Detroit. Frank was playing a gig there. And before the gig in the green room, Ike comes in with an acoustic guitar and he goes, I just got to do this. And he starts to play and sing, and Frank goes, hey, that's pretty good. Give me your name, give me your number, and maybe I'll call you. And everybody in the band is going, yeah, sure, Frank, yeah. 6 months later, Frank called for him, sent him a first-class ticket to LA, and he was in the band, and it was the lead singer on all of his records after that. Frank could tell somebody really good, and you didn't have to be a great reader, a great musician, but you had to have it coming from here. Stanley Jordan. Everybody knows who Stanley Jordan is. He's a jazz player that has a very unique style of tapping. Once at the AES show, Audio Engineering Society show, back when they used to have it at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York, all of the sessions and all the demo rooms were in hotel rooms. So I'm walking down from one end of the hotel, and I see Frank walking the other side, and he says, come up to me to the Synclavier booth. Come on, come with me. I said, okay. Anything to hang with Frank, no problem. We get out of the elevator, and there's a little kid, and he says, Frank, please come and hear me play. And Frank goes, yeah, okay, I'll come back. Now, he's about 14, 15 years old. So, of course, everybody wants to talk to Frank. 45 minutes later, he's surrounded by people, and the kid comes in and taps him on the shoulder and says, Frank, yeah, I'll be with you. An hour goes by, the kid comes in, taps him on the shoulder, and goes, oh, Frank, he says, okay. So we go out into a corner of the hotel. It's quiet, there's nobody there. And there's a little kid with his Travis Bean guitar and a little pig nose amplifier, and he starts to play, and he's tapping. And he's really bad. He's so scared that he's really bad. But he finishes, and Frank goes, hey man, that was really great. Can you play something else for me? And the kid's confidence shot to the moon, and then he ripped it. And he started to play, and he was awesome. And Frank said, let me know who you are, maybe I can help. And Frank did. He was that kind of guy. He was the type of guy that if you had an attitude, he would basically call you on it. But if you were good, and if you had it coming from the right place, he would help you as much as he could. This is what geniuses do. They help you when you're coming from the right place. Everybody knows who Stevie Wonder is. The first time I met Stevie, he was playing on 2 different keyboards, 2 different songs, and holding a conversation at the same time. Stevie's on another level, obviously. But everybody who came in contact with Stevie was a better musician, a better person for it, because he lifted you up to places you never thought you could go. You had to, because he was so good. Just to stay in the room with them, you had to. This is Richard Perry. Richard Perry was a famous producer for a while. He did Carly Simon and the Pointer Sisters. He was very big in the 70s and 80s. But he had a perfect memory for takes. He wasn't a musician, but he had a very good memory. And he would do something like this. He believed that when he'd get a band in the studio playing, and it could be studio musicians, very good players, he thought that after you learn the song, musicians got bored. So then he would have them play through again until they caught the fire again. So it wasn't uncommon to have 30, 40, 60, 80, 100 takes on any song. Now he remembered every single one. So at the end, when he thought he had it, he would say, okay, go up to the tape room and I'll take the intro from take number 15. I want the first verse from take number 23. Give me the chorus from take number 2, and on and on. And we'd think he was crazy. One day, got it wrong. And instead of taking take number 23 for the chorus, it was take number 24. And he caught it immediately. He said, that's not take number 23, that's 24. Only he would know it was take 24. Went up in the tape room, and sure enough, he was right. People like that bring you up, because now you listen closer as a result. You were forced to listen where before you couldn't. You might have let that go. Now you were forced to listen. This is Andre Gill, he's musical director for Alicia Keys. And Andre was a kid from a little town in Texas, and he knew no one in New York. Nobody. So what he would do is he found out what all the hot clubs were, where all the industry people would hang out. And he would go to an industry club, and he would walk around, and to everybody he would say, hi. That's all. Hi. Walk around. By the 7th or 8th time he did that, people thought they knew him. So he got into a conversation with somebody who happened to be the head of A&R at Sony Music, who then basically said, well, why don't you come and see me on Tuesday and let me see what you have. Andre is very good, obviously, because the next thing you know, he was producing records for Sony Music, and through that he got the job with Alicia Keys, and he's been her MD and also a Puff Daddy. He's been with Puffy for years. And it all came from a very low-key way of networking. Sometimes being low-key is best. When I first started in the business, I started as an engineer. My first position was an assistant to a really old-time, crusty Hollywood engineer who had done Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and people like that. I had 2 jobs. One was whenever the coffee cup got to half full, I had to fill it up. And the first thing he said to me was, never make this coffee cup go below half. My second job was to be clairvoyant. I had to know what he wanted before he wanted it himself. So which meant I had to be on top of it. For every session, I had to be thinking very hard what was happening. And if I thought he might need a compressor across the vocal, I would have it patched in before he even said it. Before he said to me, I need a compressor. I had it patched because I knew that's what he might want. And the reason why is because I knew that it was really important that I be 2 steps ahead of him every time. That's one of the big important lessons in my life, was to keep the coffee cup filled and to always think ahead in the business when you're working for somebody. It doesn't matter where you're at now in the music business. If you're in the music business, you can learn from any of these. Working with geniuses always raises up your level of competency. Understanding what they want and how they think as much as you can raises your level up. You can't always work with geniuses, but you can work with really smart people. You have to find those people, and you have to do anything you can to work with them. In university, find the smartest people, the smartest professors, work with them. Do whatever you can. Work for free. It's important to stay with them. They lift you up. What did we learn? Well, the music business isn't going away. Whatever you hear, whatever you read, the music business is getting bigger, not smaller. Certain portions of it aren't doing as well as they were. They're going to be better. There are fewer middlemen in the business today, which is good because now you can actually promote to your client, to your fan. You can communicate with them. You couldn't do that before. You can sell directly to them. You couldn't do that before. It's a good time to be in the music business. Most of a hit artist's income isn't from recorded music. It comes from other things. You have to exploit those other things. You can't expect to make money from recorded music. Expect to give it away because you want a fan base. Fans are important. School. You have to go to school. When I first started, you didn't have to. Now, you need that education to get farther. It's vitally important because there's so much that's so technical in the business. You have to have a basis in that. Social media is the key. You have to know social media. The more you know about social media, the more valuable you are. This is the big growth area in the music industry today. It's social media. If you know social media, you can get a job tomorrow. If you know how to play guitar or keyboards, you might not be tomorrow. It's going to be a while. Work with the best. The best lift you up. You have to find the best people in the area, the best people around you, and work with them. A lot of the stuff we talked about came from this book, Music 3.0. Here's some of my other books. Anybody have any of my books, by the way? Yeah. A few? Yeah, good. Thank you. And if you want to get in touch with me, there's my website, Facebook, Twitter, email, YouTube, my 2 blogs. I post every day on the blogs, by the way. There's always something. And if any of you have any questions, I'm most happy to take them. Yes?
I have a question related to Facebook.
Facebook, yes.
We usually show our faces with what we produce. We have some political ideas, political tools as well, since we are people. Is it a good idea to share our political tools with people that are interested with our products? What's your suggestion in that?
Share your political views. No, no. And here's why I say that. You have to think of being on Facebook, being on social media on 2 levels, a personal level and a professional level. Professionally, I would say no. Personally, yes, absolutely. But professionally, you may stratify your audience. So what may happen is you may have fewer members of your audience afterwards. Unless you're political right from the beginning, and that's part of whatever you're doing, part of your brand, yes, exactly. Then I'd say yes. But if it's not part of your brand, I'd say keep it separate. Yeah? Other questions? Yes? Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
It was very inspiring. I personally have thoughts on the view of your way of seeing an ideal education. First, for a sound engineer candidate, since technology is changing so fast, like we have a new generation of usage every 3 years maybe, and our average undergrad programs are 4 years. So what would be the ideal length of education for a student candidate now, today? And what would be the ideal teacher for him? Because, you know...
Okay, really good questions.
To compensate the needs. Thank you.
I went to Berkeley as a student first, and then I became a teacher there. One of the things I found at Berkeley was, you always hear, in Berklee College of Music, you always hear about all of the big jazz musicians or big artists that come out of Berkeley, but most of them only went through the first year. The first year at Berkeley is the best because all of the basics are in that first year in such a way that you can learn, I can't say most of what you need to know, a lot of what you need to know is there. And then it gets more specialized. That was a good way to work. I'm not sure it's the best, because what it would do is it would almost encourage you to only stay for 1 year. I don't also think that's possible now, because part of what you're learning, and if you're a musician, you're learning about recording as well. You can't all do that in 1 semester or one year. One of the things I have seen from a lot of other universities is they delay that. You go in and you learn all of your other courses first, you know, music major or whatever, you learn all the music courses, and then the 3rd and 4th year, then you learn recording. I don't think that's good either. I think it has to all start at the beginning and get more specialized as you go throughout the course. So what's best? You know, I think as long as you keep on learning new things, you can go 4 years. It works okay. And you're right, technology changes in 3 generally, and even less. But the basics, the fundamentals, always stay the same. And I think when a school gets too caught up in the tricks of the business rather than the fundamentals, that's when there's a problem. So, you know, again, my big feeling is identify the fundamentals and concentrate on those. And there's definitely 4 years of those, for sure. Who's the ideal instructor?
Related to the industry?
Yes, yes. One of the things in the United States that I've noticed is if I'm invited to speak, a good example, University of Alabama. I went to University of Alabama, and you think it's Alabama, who, you know, how hip could it be? And it was incredibly hip. These people were so good. Part of it was, one of the instructors was Stevie Wonder's musical director. And he was actually orchestral arranger. When Stevie goes out with an orchestra, he goes with them. So because of that, it was a very hip course. They were very good. I think it's important to have instructors that aren't merely based in academia. They have to have some real-world experience. It's important in any function at all, teaching people, because there has to be that real-world experience, or else you learn. You can read a book and learn the same thing. You have to have that real-world experience, in my view, anyway. Anybody else? Did I answer your question, I hope?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, first of all. It was a very inspiring talk indeed.
Thanks for asking.
Well, actually, I'm a musicologist, a rather boring person, but I'm also an amateur musician who dabbles in progressive metal. And, well, we're just at the very beginnings.
You don't look progressive metal at all.
I know. This is Dr. Jekyll. That one is
Okay.
Mr. Hyde. So. Anyway, I was just wondering, is it worth losing time on social platforms such as MySpace, Reverb Nation, Last.fm, or are they completely dead?
No. MySpace was down to 30. In 2005, MySpace was the #1 most visited site on the internet, with 100 million subscribers, 100 million users. Last year it was down to 33 million. This year it's 50. It went up. And of course Justin Timberlake bought into it. And it has changed, it has morphed. Is it a major one? No. One of the problems that we have on social media is it takes a lot of time. If you're a musician, if you're working at anything, it doesn't matter, you say, I can spend this much time on social media and be really good at it, and then I don't have enough time for everything else, or I can do this. And it's hard to find that balance. One of the things that I teach when I go to other schools, and it's a different lecture, is how to be more efficient doing that. Because efficiency in your social media presentation, your skills, is the most important thing, so you just don't spend 4 hours a day on it, which is very easy to do. So you just have to become more efficient. Question? No? Just stretching. Anybody else? Yes?
I know it's subjective, but how do you evaluate today's music's quality, let me say. It is more technologically oriented. Artistic issues are going down. So we see lots of production tricks in today's music.
Oh.
It's too mechanical, too away from artistic view.
Yes.
What's your comment on this?
I'm lucky enough that I know some of the all-time great engineers and producers, that people that have produced hits that we'll listen to for the next 100 years. A good friend of mine was one of the 5 Beatle engineers, for instance. And I've learned how the Beatles have worked. And I know people that make hits today as well and how they work. The people that are exceptionally good don't let the technology overwhelm what they do. And they make sure that the music is about passion, it's about heart. And when the heart gets left out because of technology, then you've lost something. And the people that are really good are the ones that know when to stop and say, wait, that's too much, we're losing the heart. So I'll give you a good example. It's really easy to make things perfect. You can go in with and quantize everything. You can go in and fix drum tracks so they're perfect. And the problem with that is we like when things aren't perfect. Music doesn't have to be perfect. So you have to learn how much you can fix and get away with it, and how much not to. When something sounds so far out that it doesn't sound good and move it back, but know when it's too much when you move it back. It's extremely important that you just know when to stop. So I think that's one of the things that comes from working with geniuses, because they know when to stop. I'm always surprised that when I hear of things. I'll give you an example. Again, one of my good friends, very good friend actually, worked with David Bowie. He was co-produced 4 of his albums. Every single vocal except one was first take. Every single vocal except one. And the only reason why that one vocal wasn't first take was because he was whispering at the beginning and he was shouting at the end. So they had to set him up 2 different ways. Every single vocal. Now, I've listened to those tapes, I've listened to those tracks, and if you isolate him, you go, a little shaky. When you listen to everything together, you go, wow. So it's important to know when to stop and when not to. That's the best thing. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
So, which part of music industry do you think is dead? I mean, is it the recording studios? Because in our university, all the students want to take the audio post-production path and work in TVs. Even the musicians want to make music for TV series, movies, and things like that. So, what do you think about it?
Okay, recording studios are definitely hurting. I was telling a story last night. When I moved to Los Angeles, there were a huge number of 24-track commercial studios, and now we're down to, I think it was 225 or something, and now we're down to, you can count them on 2 hands, big ones, because everybody has a home studio. But that's been going on in LA for 20 years, and way before even a revolution now where on a laptop you have such power. This was going on way before then. So big studios are dead. They're not dead. People still like to use them. They use them differently. They don't have as much money because the budgets are smaller. Composition is really difficult. Now, I don't know about your market, but I know about my market. And again, I have friends that have Emmys and Grammys and Oscars for composition. And a lot of them are leaving the business. They're going to academia actually. One of the problems, there's 2 problems that happen. They're not problems, 2 things that happen. When you're talking about as a serious composer, and if you're composing for television, for instance, what happens is, when you first begin, you you're hot because you're new. You don't get paid a lot because you're new. You rise to a certain point, you start to get more money, and then you're making too much money, and then somebody new comes in. This is the natural way things work. It used to be you can make enough money when you're hot in those 5, 10 years. You didn't have to worry. Now, the budgets are all smaller. So it's getting more and more difficult because there's not as much money as there was. A lot of times things are done on spec, where they weren't before. In other words, they want you to write it first, then they'll say, okay, then we'll take it. This is the way the commercial industry has always worked in the United States. People write the commercials and then they're chosen, out of 10 maybe. So that's rather difficult. Movies were never like that. Movies, you know, you would get the score, you would get a big chunk of money to do it, and now it's less and less. And mostly because they say, oh, you can do it at home. You don't need an orchestra, you can do it at home. So there's things like that to happen. So I guess what I'm saying is it harder? No, it's evolved. Like all of this, it all changes and you have to change with it. You have to know, well, there's less money, so it means I'll have to do more work. I can't concentrate on just this, I'll have to do these two things as well. That's the way the music business is going. If you just concentrate on one area, there's so much competition, you may have a hard time. If you broaden what you can do, you're a lot better off. Does that help? Yeah, good. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.